Hi, I'm Brainard Carey, Director of Praxis Center, and today I want to talk about a post-pandemic process to get into a museum, an art museum, and it's through their educational department, lectures, public programming. So briefly, what's happened in 2020 in the pandemic, and this is really a post-pandemic strategy with museums. During the pandemic, when museums were closed, they typically had different kind of talks, right? Museums always had talks in auditoriums. They had artists giving talks, they had panel discussions, they had presentations, slideshows, different kinds of things. And of course, during the pandemic, all that stopped. But what started happening was they started using Zoom, of course, because everybody started using Zoom for learning, for public events. So what happened for museums, and I've learned this basically from museum curators that are speakers in Praxis Center every week, and they talk to us from all over the world. And what museum curators are saying is that during the pandemic, they couldn't do the panel discussions like they used to do, obviously. So they started doing them with Zoom. And what they noticed was attendance went way up. Instead of 50 or 100 people, now they had, hundreds of people, and that was because they were also from out of state, sometimes out of the country. They lived nowhere near the museum. Previously, this was impossible. You had to live near the museum in order to attend an event there. So what that made them do was make more events. Everybody made more Zoom events last year, maybe too many, right? But they started making more events and people started coming. So what this means for you as an artist is that you can also pitch an event to a museum. And there's two sections to a typical art museum. There's curatorial section, that's where they're just talking about hanging artwork more or less. And then there's educational department, which is about all education services, which means public events, workshops, fairs for kids, artist talks, anything, even tours of the building, all that falls under education. And they have money for that to pay educators to come in. As an artist, you're an educator. You could look at a local museum. This is the process. You look at a museum nearby you and you say, or it could be far away for that matter, but you realize that, wow, this museum has an exhibit coming up in 6 months. They plan that far ahead, and you should too, or 2 or 3 months anyway. They have an exhibit coming up on a photographer or someone who does collage or a sculptor, and you think, I relate to that. I could do something about that. So then you write to the museum, public affairs department. It's called different things, educational department, public events department. But call the museum, ask who's in charge of public events, Zoom talks, public affairs, and you'll find out. Write to that person and say, hey, I see you're having a show in 6 months about, the photographer, so and so, and say, I'm also a photographer and I'd like to give an artist talk on photography. Or I'd like to put together a panel discussion about photography from analog to digital. Or something else. I'd like to do a workshop for children or a family workshop. These are all things they're hungry for and they will pay for. Again, the idea is to get a gig working for a museum in the educational department in this post-pandemic environment by doing some kind of online talk or even workshop, where you can look at the local museums public events to see what works and how to pitch it, right? You want to work with a museum that's actually doing these kind of talks, doing these kind of events. So check out your local museum, and then what I would do is look under their public events. What are they showing? What are they doing? That's the kind of way you would want to present it. And you'll see they're giving talks, panel discussions, tours, all kinds of things. Pitch one of those things to them and pitch it far out, like 6 months. Again, you're just saying, I'm an artist and I have an expertise in that area. I could speak and help, viewers understand that exhibit that's coming up on Picasso in 6 months because I use collage techniques that relate to how people see things from different angles. Something like that. Something that relates to your work somehow. And they can ask for more information. And then you basically give them a description, just like you see it on their website. Probably a paragraph or two that explains what you're going to do in your tour, in your artist talk, in your panel discussion, in your Zoom presentation. So I hope that helps. This is a way to get not only a paying gig in a museum and get involved with a museum, but it's also a way to then get to know curators within that museum who now know you're an artist and will want to see your art. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just ask.